Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. In the battle for the presidency, Democrat Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has decided to go after President Joe Biden. Over the weekend, RFK said that new bribery charges against Biden and his son Hunter are troubling and must be investigated. Team Biden has a new target of items that make our lives comfortable. Following calls to change our cars and gas stoves, now they want to regulate water heaters, all in the name of climate change. The scorching heat that has turned deadly in the West is heading east. This week, cities from Boston to Washington could see 100-degree highs, and those are historic levels. And it was so hot this weekend that the movie theaters were packed, and it seems most went to see Barbie or Oppenheimer, because together they raked in a whopping $230 million. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
And welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Monday, July 24, 2023. Let's get to the day's top stories. I hope you had a great weekend. Glad to have you here. A Biden campaign spokesperson says that the president's age is his superpower. Let's be honest. It's more like a threat to national security and a detriment to all of us. We'll discuss with our friend Lieutenant Colonel Alan West coming up. Meanwhile, new report suggests that the FBI corroborated the FD-1023 that could be the undoing of the Biden crime family. Those details coming up. And later, is the DeSantis campaign listing? Is it in trouble? We'll ask an expert pollster what the stats are saying. Those stories, much more, coming up on this Monday edition of America's Voice Live. Well, the move by CMT to try to cancel country singer Jason Aldean is just the latest assault on free speech in America. But have you noticed what's happening? You should pay attention. I mean, start with this. The leftist ban on the song that is anti-crime and pro-small-town values, well, they failed in epic fashion to ban him. The song now #1 looks to be going up with a bullet, gaining steam, in fact. The radical left came out 3 weeks ago and tried to paint the anti-human trafficking, anti-child sex slavery movie as some sort of QAnon conspiracy. The movie The Sound of Freedom just posted better numbers on its third weekend than it did when it debuted. And the movie has brought in $125 million at the box office. Pretty remarkable. Then, of course, the infamous Bud Light debacle, giving Dylan Mulvaney a beer while in the bathtub, trying to push radical transgender ideology on its customers who reacted swiftly and severely. Bud Light has now lost over $30 billion. Target got smashed as well for its women's swimsuits with the tuckable front so that men could wear them more comfortably. They've lost piles of money over there. You see, the cancel culture is backfiring, and the bully tactics of the left may have run out of runway. People are just sick and tired of being told what they have to accept. You have to accept this. No, I don't. People are tired of being bullied by big mouths on the left, and they have found a way to be heard by not spending any money with these clowns. Spending no money at all with these clowns. Bud Light, let me tell you, will never be in the top 10 again for beer sales in America. Never. Let's be honest, it wasn't a great product anyway, so leaving not much of a hardship for most. In fact, I'm guessing some folks are like, hey, I found some real beer with some actual flavor. Go figure. But the cancel culture warriors certainly not giving up. They found a big, juicy new target in the last few weeks, and they're giving their all to silence Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and that's not working either. It seems he has enough money to keep, well, right on talking. I don't think the people in power are going to like what he's been saying either. Listen to this.
The alarming thing that's come out in Judge Doty's decision, this is a federal district judge, just issued a 155-page decision forbidding the White House from having any contact with social media companies because it abused those contacts so badly over the past 3 years. What we now know is that the White House had deployed an army of federal agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the IRS, and many others, to threaten Facebook, Google, and Twitter with withdrawing their Section 230 immunity, which is an existential threat. Those companies cannot exist without that immunity, and they were told that if they did not censor the president's opponents, critics of these policies, that they would lose that immunity.
Look, I know for some of you it's hard to listen to him the way he speaks because of that medical condition. For me, it's no problem at all because when you're speaking truth, your voice is second. That's right, RFK Jr. is saying it like it is. And what did he say about these people that try to censor free speech? Here's what he had to say.
When we look back in history, they're never the good guys. And it's inevitable that if you do start censoring speech, because government abuses every power that it's given, and if government suddenly has the capacity to censor its critics, it has a license for any atrocity.
Now, look, to be clear, I'm not voting for the man, but he's exactly right on this point. It's what Democrats some 50 years ago used to believe, and it's what conservatives, not necessarily all Republicans, unfortunately, still believe. Today, the government will abuse any power that it takes from you or that you give to it. The founders knew about this as well. That is why they designed our system of government by defining what the government cannot do. Not what it can do, but what it cannot do. The Constitution, by and large, is don't do this, and don't do this. And splitting it up into three equal branches of government for three places of power. Except Congress, well, Congress isn't really acting how they thought it would. But that's a story for another monologue. We'll get to that. Anyway, back to the current day leftists. They don't like what Kennedy said because because I think they actually believe they are somehow delivering on the greater good by trying to silence anyone and everyone they disagree with. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, for example, is proud of the way the government is trying to tell you what to believe and censoring any information it deems as not true. The government deciding what's true and what's false. I mean, this is what they support now. Listen to what she says.
Well, first of all, they want to talk about censorship, that anytime you point out untruths, you're censoring, you're stopping people from speaking. It's not that we're not stopping people from speaking. People can speak, but we're also going to give the American people the truth so that they can have science and facts and history against wild, outlandish claims that the Republicans are trying to get. That's not only going to keep them from going to the polls or suppressing vote or telling untruths, but is also really very detrimental to the American people.
So, and Stacey Plaskett, who is from the U.S. Virgin Islands, the member of Congress from the U.S. Virgin Islands, spent her day last week attacking RFK Jr. and labeling him a racist, anti-Semite, maybe a white supremacist. And if she didn't say it straight out, it is certainly what she was alluding to at other times. If you don't bend the knee to the culture cult of the left, they will try to destroy you. They'll run you through the meat grinder. But not everyone responds to the bullying. Not everyone is scared away or willing to back down to such threats, like the aforementioned RFK speaking out about ivermectin here. Remember, the media and government told you using this wasn't good. It was a bad idea. It was horse paste or some horse. Well, I can't say that on a family show, but you know what I mean. Listen.
There are now 100 studies that show that ivermectin had profound benefits, generally speaking, a 70 to 85% reduction in hospitalizations and deaths. It was really a miracle drug, particularly in the later pandemic.
I'm saying if that was all in like Bangladesh or South America, it could be because
it was all over the world.
Off parasites.
It was all over the world. The countries where they use it for parasites, Nigeria, which has the highest river blindness burden in the world, did have the lowest COVID death rate in the world. They use both. They also have the biggest malaria burden, so virtually the entire population is on hydroxychloroquine, and a large part of the population is on ivermectin for river blindness. So and they had almost no vaccination. They had, I think, something like 1.3% vaccination. So they did very well.
Now, the one thing the left and the media complex partners have been able to silence is the truth. Because if you don't report on big stories, it's almost like they don't even exist. Just pretend they're not there. And when your number one goal is to destroy Donald Trump and all Republicans, then you remain silent on huge stories like the release of the FD 1023 that shows Hunter Biden and his daddy did in fact work together, and they collected millions of dollars along the way selling you and me out to foreign countries while filling their own pockets. And now we've learned that Joe Biden was apparently on voice, on speakerphone. Well, he's sitting there with Hunter. He's on speakerphone. Wow, we'll get to that coming up. But here's this.
The big one that always comes to mind is what happened in Ukraine when he got the prosecutor, Mr. Shokin, fired. I mean, that's always the big one. The irony here is that is the very kind of situation that they turned on President Trump 4 years ago. And in fact, it looks like they're the ones who were involved in some shady dealings when it came to the country of Ukraine. It's always the way it seems the Democrats operate. They try to accuse you of what they're in fact involved in. Right. That's exactly what it seems to me they did to President Trump. So I know the other day, John Solomon talked about how we need to go back and look at all the things that took place in 2019 during the impeachment inquiry. We're doing that. We're going back and looking at all those key facts because I think those are coming back to light now. So yeah, we will look at all that information.
Yeah. You see, diluting the truth only goes so far, and sometimes there's just too much to fight. And for the leftist media, every now and then that time arrives, like realizing that Joe Biden is the most unpopular president. Second most unpopular. I guess Jimmy Carter still has the crown. Listen.
In something titled, "Why is Joe Biden so unpopular?" Andrew Romano writes that at this point in his term, Joe Biden is the second most unpopular president in modern U.S. history. Jimmy Carter was the first. Romano cites polling data from 538, where Biden's approval rating 910 days into his term stood at just 39%.
Yeah. 39%, 910 days in, now we're 912. It didn't improve much in the last 24 hours. I can promise you that. Now, getting back to the idea of how to deal with a bully. It seems in China they know a thing or two about how to handle a bully. One of those ways is to ignore them altogether. In fact, here's how the Biden administration is pursuing their foreign policy objectives when it comes to China. Tell me, if you were China, how would you respond to Anthony Blinken right here?
When it comes to China, if it wants to be seen as a responsible leader globally, it has to be responsive to demand signals that it's getting from the region, from around the world. One of those demand signals, and certainly that'll be the case at COP28, is for it to take the necessary actions to curb emissions and to do what's necessary to get to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is an ongoing conversation. I think it was very important that John went and renewed that dialogue, but also conveyed the sense of urgency.
China was so interested in John Kerry licking their boots, they ignored him about climate change. So interested in Anthony Blinken, China's just saying, yeah, run along, pipsqueak. And the same to the weaklings of the Democrat Party. They're continuing to take shots at America because despite the posturing and the bullying, China has a plan and they are executing it. The plan is to take over everything, including our country. And they know the Biden administration will never call them out over anything serious, like the CCP hacking into Biden's official private emails and officials on his staff and the cabinet. They won't even speak to that. Here's Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo dodging that question.
Do you believe China was behind it? Do you have any reason to believe it was anyone other than China?
I don't know, and I'm certainly not going to speculate. Like I said, it's a significant hack. It's unacceptable, whoever did it. And we're going to investigate it fully and find out who's behind it.
Yeah. Like they did with the White House cocaine. Yeah, they're on top of it. Trust us. We're on top of it until you forget about it and something else comes up in the news headlines. But we're on top of it until then. So do your part. Stand up to the bullies in the Democrat Party, whether it's at the school board meeting or local politics or members of Congress. Reject censorship. Demand the truth. Keep demanding that people are held accountable for their crimes. And keep fighting for this great nation. We're still a long way from the end, my friends. Keep fighting for this great nation. Coming up after the break, the Biden administration is not making any of our enemies concerned. Announcing a few weeks ago, we've run out of ammunition while trying to help Ukraine stay armed. And now, with woke military policies, can we ever restore our national security? Well, we'll talk about that next with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Straight ahead. I have never felt this way in my adult life, I can tell you that. To look around and say, you know what? I don't feel safe with Joe Biden as president of the United States. I've never felt that way. I've disliked presidents, not liked policies, but not had the idea that the incompetence was so overwhelming that we were in danger. But I think it's safe to say with President Biden as commander-in-chief, the United States is not ready for any foreign threats, certainly not from China, who the Biden administration refuses to condemn publicly at every turn. Instead, they kiss the ring and lick the boots. His age, of course, one factor, even though Biden supporters and staffers refused to admit it. Co-chair of Biden's, quote, campaign, if you can even call it that, Jeffrey Katzenberger, who's also a famous movie producer, had this to say about Biden's age. Joe Biden's age is his superpower. And as I've seen firsthand, his fastball is as good as ever. Joe Biden's never had a fastball. It's probably as good as ever because he's never had one. I think our definitions of superpower are a lot different, Jeffrey. Oh, and I don't think President Biden will be throwing out the first pitch at any baseball game because he can't walk to the mound. And our military, you know, the one that keeps the global status quo that has created the most peaceful time in world history, you can kiss that goodbye right now. Listen to this.
If you don't know, when you're an active duty soldier who is transitioning genders, you have to go by standards that align with your gender in khaki and deers until that is changed. This means that because my gender is a male in khaki and deers, I cannot present as a female in uniform. I have a few ways that I find help me cope with my gender dysphoria while on duty, and I'd like to share them. I'm gonna be honest, they're not a lot, but they do help me. The first thing I do is wear clear nail polish. According to regulation, men are allowed to wear clear nail polish while on duty. When I'm in uniform, this makes me feel a bit more feminine because my hands feel pretty when my nails are painted.
Yeah, this is going well. This is what all of your tax dollars are paying for, by the way. So if this is even reversible at this point, I don't know. With me to discuss it, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, former Congressman, and current Executive Director of the ACRU, as well as host of the Steadfast and Loyal podcast, Alan West. Colonel, what was that I just saw? What is that? What is going on with our military, top to bottom, front to back?
Well, it's interesting, Steve. It's great to be with you. That the lead in to this segment, you showed the World War II memorial there on the National Mall. And then you showed that apparition of a soldier. Now, you think about the young man who stormed the beaches of Normandy and Iwo Jima, and then you look at that person that is wearing our uniform. This is completely a degradation of our culture and our military, the sense of honor, integrity, and character, and it is undermining our military readiness, all for the sake of leftist wokeness. And I can guarantee you that that individual is being played all throughout China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Islamic jihadists, and that is just fueling the fury of our enemies because they realize that this is a weak point for the United States of America. If this is the type of emphasis we have for our uniformed military servicemen and women.
So, you know, they talk about their difficulty in recruiting. Right, they're missing recruitment marks for the first time, well, that I can remember in a long time, for sure. But they put things like that out there. You know, these are the sorts of things we're seeing. I'm sorry, they're marketing as bad as what they're doing at Bud Light or CMT or a host of other places. Your marketing is all wrong, guys. If you want to be, you know, what happened to an army of one? What happened to all of those things, right? The things that actually worked, that show America as strong and capable and the one that protect the weak in the world. That's America. Was when you were there, should still be, shouldn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I want you to understand that we're in the 50th year of the all-volunteer military force that everyone said was going to fail. But it's been a resounding success, except for the last 2 years of the Biden administration when we have not met those military recruiting goals because we're focused on the gender dysphoria. We're focused on, you know, paying for abortion. We're focused on electric vehicles. We're focused on climate change in the military. I have never seen a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine be able to go out and fight the weather. As a matter of fact, we're supposed to fight through the weather. And so when you think about all of these things that are happening, without a doubt, this is the most trying time. And just last week or a couple of weeks ago, we had the Secretary of the Army, Christine Wormuth, who came out and said that she's concerned about too much of this warrior ethos in the Army. So she does not want to recruit from generational families that have been serving in the military in combat, like my family, which started out my father serving in World War II, all the way up to right now with a nephew who's a lieutenant colonel in the Army as well. So this is the type of, you know, delusion that we have in leadership of our military and therefore undermining our national security.
It is galling to me. I didn't serve in the military, but a supporter of the military and military people like yourself, the people that stood post for me and stood on that wall for me and watched to make sure that we were safe, that had my six when I slept and my family slept. And I just do not understand the attacks on the military, the degradation of the military, frankly, in the feminization of the men in the military. You know, I tip my hat to those women that fly A-10 Warthogs and those other, you know, fighter planes and the helicopters and do great work. No question about it. piloting ability of the women out there. But what are we doing? Because it just feels like we're just diminishing our military every single day, Alan.
Well, we are, and it comes back to what you just said. Is George Orwell once quoted, "A nation sleeps peacefully at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on her behalf." But when you look at what the focus is on from this administration, it is clear in the National Defense Authorization Act that they want to have these policies that undermine the warrior ethos, that undermines the readiness. And look at the fact that you had 206 Democrats, 4 Republicans that voted against the National Defense Authorization Act because it took money away from these leftist woke policies in our military. And now it's over in the Senate, and we'll see what happens there. And furthermore, you have Joe Biden has nominated a person to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown, who has taken the United States Air Force as his chief of staff from being marginally ready down to being weak in their readiness. That is a report from the Heritage Foundation. We have seen the B-2 bomber fleet be grounded, and we have seen the F-35 go down to 55 to 60% readiness. And that is the person we want to have as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who, by the way, says he only wants 46% white pilots in the Air Force.
Yeah, because that's the most important thing. You know, if it's a surgeon or a soldier or any place in between, I want the most qualified person in that job. Not
Correct.
somebody that, passes some litmus test and checks some box. If somebody's splitting my heart open or protecting my tail, I want people that are qualified, Colonel. I'll give you the last word.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's why it's such a big concern. And we have to win this White House. We have to clean out the bureaucracy, especially in the Department of Defense, and root out all of these cultural Marxism, DEI programs, all of these things, and get back to understanding that peace comes through strength. And we're not showing our enemy strength right now. And they are licking their chops, believing that this is a moment in time because America is displaying weakness.
Yeah, we certainly are. Colonel Alan West, always appreciate your input, sobering as it is. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you, Steve.
I appreciate you, my friend. Coming up after the break, Nancy Pelosi had some of the most ridiculous reasons why Americans should support President Biden. I'll show you those coming up next. It's a treat. Well, sources are now reporting that the FBI field office in Pittsburgh corroborated several details of the FT 1023 back in 2020, 3 years ago. Pittsburgh FBI agents allegedly told the Delaware office that travel records from the confidential human source confirmed that the source had traveled to the locations detailed in the document. The trips included a late 2015 or early 2016 visit to Kyiv, Ukraine, a trip a couple of months later to Vienna, Austria, and travel to London in 2019. The FBI briefed U.S. Attorney David Weiss on these corroborations, but according to the whistleblowers last week, Weiss was under the impression that he was going to get a call to call the shots in the case. Instead, it seems the DOJ did nothing at all. On CNN yesterday, Nancy Pelosi attempted to stay relevant. It was painful. And give the president a boost with this. Take a look.
This president did such a remarkable job. He is a person of such knowledge, such vision for the country, such knowledge of the issues, such strategic thinking, and such a legislator. And on top of it all, a person who connects with the American people. He just has to get out there.
Yeah, you know, the problem here is the more that President Biden gets out there, the more people actually see how unfit for office he is. And his office knows that. But Pelosi's stamp of approval doesn't mean much, considering she's older than Joe Biden, and it shows. When Dana Bash asked her about the whistleblower hearing held last week, and not only did Pelosi get the hearing confused with the censorship one, she also confused the identity of the star witness. Hopeless. Watch.
This past week, 2 IRS whistleblowers, career investigators, testified under oath that the Justice Department slow-walked the investigation into President Biden's son, Hunter, and ignored recommendations to file more serious felony charges. Are you confident the politics did not play a role here?
Well, it was since you referenced the hearing, what a ridiculous clown show, again, on the part of the Republicans. Here was a purpose that you described. What do? Bring in Joe Kennedy talking about censorship, that he's being censored as he's talking to the world in a congressional hearing, and showing pictures that had nothing to do with the essence of it.
I think you mentioned Robert F. Kennedy, but on the essence of it,
sorry, just
that's okay. There are a lot of Kennedys.
Yeah, the stars of the Democrat Party are fading and fading fast, and the replacements, well, you've got Kamala Harris. She's a big star. AOC and the like. You know, their big stars are no better for the country. In fact, they could, be worse. Some of the weapons and ammunition being sent to Ukraine are finding its way into the wrong hands due to a lack of oversight. I know you're shocked to hear that. A new report from the Office of Inspector General at the Department of Defense concludes that the U.S. is unable to keep track of the weapons that are being sent east. And Ukraine's law enforcement has busted up multiple gangs and Russian groups that had gotten their hands on thousands of rounds of ammunition, along with equipment like grenade launchers, bulletproof vests, machine guns. It's nice. The weaponry was either stolen from the front lines or never made it there. Back in 22, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was asked how the U.S. was keeping track of the weapons it was sending to Ukraine. His answer, quote, "We have to depend on the Ukrainians at this point to do the right thing and make sure that they're prudent and careful about how they issue these weapons out and account for these weapons. And we're going to trust the most corrupt country in the world." Brilliant. Looks like dependence is working out nicely. What is wrong with these people? All right, coming up after the break, the DeSantis campaign not doing so well. Why? That's next with Big Data Polls' Rich Barron. There he is. He's up next on America's Voice Live. Welcome back to America's Voice Live on a Monday. Thank you for being here. Look, as we get closer to the presidential primary season, which begins, by the way, January the 15th, the Iowa caucus for Republicans, January the 15th, it seems the DeSantis campaign just can't get out of the starting blocks. Now, I acknowledge that it's still very early, but DeSantis has already fallen to number 3 in a statewide poll in South Carolina, where a Fox News poll has DeSantis coming in third behind former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, of course, in first place. And polling in DeSantis' home state of Florida consistently has him well behind President Trump. It doesn't seem like anything he's doing has made any significant difference to the polling, and he's got plenty of money. So the question is, why? With me to discuss, the director of the Big Data Poll and the host of Inside the Numbers, Rich Barris. You can also find Rich at peoplespundit.locals.com. I think I got that right. Rich, how are you?
That's right, Steve. Thanks for having me as always. Doing well.
I really appreciate it. So, Ron DeSantis, before he entered the race, had some buzz, had some energy and so forth, gets into the race. And because, look, people look at what he's doing in Florida, swatting down one woke idea after another, swat. And yet he gets out on the national campaign trail. He gets no traction. It's like he's stuck in neutral. What's going on?
I think his initial rise and the closest we ever had him to Donald Trump was 43 to 31. And that was a little bit after the midterm elections. I think he was benefiting from two things. One, Republicans they underperformed in the midterms and they were very unhappy and they were looking potentially for another direction because the media had been blaming Trump. And I think a lot of that is worn off because that's a very oversimplified reason for why Republicans underperformed. But also, he was an idea, Steve. It was an idea. And he, as a person, as a candidate, hasn't really lived up to that idea. And the moment he got scrutiny was the moment he made some very big mistakes over the handling of the indictment, before Tucker got thrown off the air, the flip-flopping on Ukraine. And then when they did finally announce, it's been amateur hour over there. There's no nice way to put it. You don't overhype in politics. And when you start to fall behind in polls, you don't point to a singular event and say, this is when I'm going to regroup. This is when I'm going to retake the lead. And then your announcement, it becomes a complete technological catastrophe and the world's laughing at you. And then it's one thing
if he doesn't get some energy, though, if he doesn't get some spark somewhere, he's in trouble here. I mean, he's got piles of money. His money's not, he doesn't have as much as Trump, but he's got plenty. He's got a message and a track record in Florida. He won 20 points in the governor's race. He's obviously a viable, electable candidate, and yet nothing. To me, I'm surprised. That's all.
And the money he's got is not grassroots money, so he's got to be wise with what he does with it. And you can see they're slimming down, and they're looking at Iowa, and they've moved that message a lot to the right on these social issues. What we saw with the Fox poll is very similar. Our poll in Iowa came out a few days before that. Fox had Trump up by 30 in Iowa. We had him up by 32. Ironically, Steve, it's just that even in evangelical heavy Iowa, and the caucuses are usually 60% evangelical, they're not prioritizing abortion and issues like that. Only about 1 in 5 evangelicals say that that's their number one issue. And Trump actually leads with those voters. It's a smaller lead, but overall he leads with evangelicals by 30 points in our poll. I think Fox was 29. So we're all very much in the same area. The bottom line is the voters are very concerned about the administrative state and beating Biden, and then also the economy, which Trump has a huge lead on. So it's just the issues that we care about now are Trump's. What's that?
Let me talk to you about that. All right, so Trump v. Biden straight up. Trump v. Biden straight up. Right now, some of the polling has Biden up, some of the polling has Trump up. But Joe Biden, every time out there, looks weaker and weaker. Yeah. So you and I have talked about this in the past, and I've talked extensively about it. I don't think Joe Biden makes it to Election Day. I'm not sure he makes it to Thanksgiving, honestly. Well, what are your thoughts?
You know, ironically, it could be a name recognition situation right now, but ironically, he polls the strongest. We've polled everybody. Michelle Obama's not going to run, but somebody like a Gavin Newsom, we were talking about a Gretchen Whitmer. I actually think Gretchen Whitmer could be, and I think you do as well, could be a real problem for Republicans. She's in a battleground state. Gavin Newsom, you could paint as a coastal liberal, but still at this moment, Biden is the strongest. I will say this when it comes to DeSantis. He has angered some of the Trump-only vote. And whether it's our poll in Iowa, Suffolk had a poll last week in Ohio, and then Mitchell Research in your state of Michigan showed that there is a big chunk, and it's growing. And we knew they always existed, but we thought that DeSantis had a chance to win them in a general. But we call them the Trump only or the Trump or bust vote. And it's getting to the point now, Steve, Republicans really need to tiptoe through this thing because Iowa goes back to being very close if it's Ron DeSantis. The Suffolk poll found the same margin that we found in Iowa. And then, of course, Mitchell had only Trump competitive in Michigan. Everybody else got killed. So I think people are forgetting the feat, that we saw in 2016 and almost again in 2020. Trump really almost, or he did carry these states in 16. In order to beat him, it's very hard not to make his voters mad. And unfortunately for Ron DeSantis, he's made an enemy of a majority. And it's a tight road,
that's correctable. That's correctable down the road. But no, right now you're at a point where Trump is the odds-on favorite, no matter how many of these indictments you lay at his feet, especially when you see real crimes apparently having been committed by the Biden family. And you've got Devin Archer coming to testify in front of Congress this week. I don't know that Joe Biden can continue to take this onslaught because he denied over and over and over again that he ever discussed with Hunter or with his business partners any of this stuff. And yet we're told that Devin Archer is going to come and testify that not only did he talk to people, he was on speakerphone in front of other people talking to business associates. That could be very damning. I'll give you the last word.
They thought Devin would go quietly into the good night, do his time, and shut up, and he's not doing that. So, as many times as I hear people like Ted Cruz say, no matter what we get, the Democrats in the Senate will never cut Joe Biden loose. I disagree. I think if he becomes not viable anymore, they'll figure out a way to cut him loose. And this is getting worse and worse as every passing day goes on. And remember, this is a binary choice, folks, when in a presidency. So for all of the downfalls for any Republican candidate, if this gets worse for Biden, they don't cut him loose, Steve, then they're going to be in a very bad situation, come the election.
Yeah, they're going to have to cut him loose, or otherwise it's over. Greatly appreciate it, Rich, as I always do. Thank you for being here.
All the best.
All right, my friend. Coming up after the break, Joe Rogan isn't going to let anyone forget the Clinton connection to Jeffrey Epstein and Pedophile Island. Those details next here on America's Voice Live. Well, in a conversation on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast last week, host Joe Rogan and guest comedian Duncan Trussell touched, no pun intended, on former President Bill Clinton's travel connections to Epstein Island, Pedophile Island, and the painting of Bill Clinton in a blue dress that hung in the entrance to Epstein's Manhattan mansion. Why do you think it was there? Here's what they think. Listen.
That painting is like, I got you. That's what that is.
Oh, right.
You got a president who was on the flight logs 26 times with Epstein, and you got that guy in a dress in your house.
Okay, I'm dumb. I'm sorry, dude. I'm officially dumb because I've known about that picture, and I've just been like, why would anybody want a picture
That
of
is,
Bill?
I got you.
That's just a like, hey, yeah.
That's I got you.
I got you, B. Yeah, sure do. Epstein's plane, the Lolita Express. Flight logs show Clinton flew to the Lolita Express 17 times. 17 times! Between 1993 and 1995. Well, if that's true, wouldn't the Secret Service have gone along? Wouldn't we be able to verify who was there and what went on? Yes is the answer you're looking for, but they'll hide it somehow. Rogan and Trussell talk about the implications of the blue dress painting as well. Listen to this.
That is terrifying.
That's terrifying. Imagine if I knew some horrible dark secrets about you and you came over my house and I have a giant painting of you right when you walk into the front door.
Yeah.
Of you in a dress.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, buddy.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah.
You're right.
How terrifying that would be?
That's terrifying.
You know he knows about it. I mean, you walk right in and bam, there's that painting.
And now you kind of control a president.
Epstein's first visit to the White House was a month after Clinton's inauguration. He went to the executive mansion. Did Clinton and Epstein. They got together 14 times there. Epstein would later be tried, convicted, and jailed for his crimes of pedophilia, child trafficking. Both Clinton's bodyguard and Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre claimed that Clinton visited the island, and Clinton has continually denied these allegations, but we've got it in the flight logs. Billy? Come on now. Okay, so here's a little update for you. I know you're going to be glued to this one. Trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney taking his show on the road. Creative Artists Agency has listed Mulvaney on their site. Mulvaney made news when, of course, he caused a boycott of Bud Light, announcing to his 6 million Instagram followers that his picture was on the side of a Bud Light can. Turned out it was only one can, but it set in motion the destruction of an American icon. The corporation of Anheuser-Busch, which is no longer, by the way, an American company, is owned by InBev in Belgium. The boycott has caused the king of beers to plummet from number 1 to number 14 in beer sales as of this morning. Mulvaney moved to Peru, hoping to avoid controversy, but the now blonde Mulvaney is back and prepared to explain his side again, except that nobody cares. He'll be speaking at colleges nationwide this fall. Expect like 3 people at each event. Earlier this summer, podcaster Joe Rogan called Mulvaney, quote, mentally ill and an attention whore. Well, based on these pictures. Red State suggested Mulvaney and the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro have a question and answer event that'll sell tickets, but really the trans people don't want controversy. Honest. Does anyone miss Barnum and Bailey's circus yet? This clown show would do better in a 3-ring circus, wouldn't it? Hey, Bud Light, how'd that thing work out with that beer in the bathtub? There will be no hearing in New York City for the more than 1,300 Black Lives Matter protesters from the Summer of Hate 2020. The city claims going to court could be costly and politically fraught. The National Lawyers Guild filed a lawsuit claiming New York Police Department deprived protesters of their First Amendment rights and conducting a campaign of brutality. Starting in late May 2020, nationwide race riots saw attacks by Antifa and Black Lives Matter, resulting in over $2 billion worth of damage. This is part of the video you're watching. It was mostly peaceful. The lawsuit will be one of the largest payouts ever, with 1,300 plaintiffs receiving $9,950 each. Attorneys have asked for $13 million. New York City Councilwoman Vicky Palladino tweeted this: "Thank you for burning down our city. Here's millions of dollars we can't afford. Where's the settlement for all the actually peaceful anti-mandate protesters who were arrested and blacklisted and lost their jobs for no reason whatsoever? Protesters set police cars on fire, threw rocks and bottles at officers, and law enforcement was just responding to an unprecedented and out-of-control situation. Yeah, all true. We'll get back to the news after this quick break and a message from our sponsor, Birch Gold. We're days away from the Durban Accords, the greatest threat to the U.S. dollar's global dominance of the past 80 years. On August 22nd, BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are expected to announce the launch of a new international super currency, fully backed by gold or other commodities. This is part of their long-term plan to supplant the U.S. and the dollar as cornerstones of the global financial system. How can you protect your IRA or 401k from the fallout from this landmark announcement? Well, diversify with gold from Birch Gold Group. Historically, gold has been safe in times of high uncertainty, which is, well, right now. Get a free information kit on gold IRAs and decide for yourself if a tax-sheltered retirement account backed by physical precious metals is right for you. Text the word America to 989898. There is a monumental shift happening among nations that control 1/3 of the world's GDP, and it kicks off on August 22nd. Arm yourself with information to protect your retirement savings. Text America to the number 989898. Get your free information kit from Birch Gold. All right? Now, after the break, we'll have a story that reminds you and me about how wonderful this country of ours still is. Plus, your answers to the America's Voice question of the day. Is the era of cancel culture over after Jason Aldean's song tops the charts? What do you think? Well, we always want to bring you a story that tells you how great this country is. How about this? A family in Pennsylvania counting their blessings at home where their firstborn child who spent 181 days in a hospital half the year after being told he wouldn't make it. Baby Zaylen, born to Kristen Risbin 16 weeks early. He had a hole in his heart, needed constant oxygen, but after 181 days, he's resting at home. Risbin says that when he was born, he was so tiny he could fit in the palm of her hand, weighing just 1 pound, 6 ounces. Inspired by the care and attention of the hospital staff, Gibson now studying to become a NICU nurse, neonatal intensive care unit nurse. That's good stuff. Congratulations. How about the question of the day now, real quick? Is the era of cancel culture over after Jason Aldean's song topped the charts? I don't know if it's over, but not as good as it was. Lynn Paris Lux, no, they want all truth silence. Poor idiots get hurt so easily. Robert Zadragan, doubtful. Paul Stawecki, no way. Stupidity runs too deep in America. Tony Montez, no. Didn't CMT cancel his music video? Yeah, they did. That won't work out. Michael Rice, it is the power of the majority speaking without saying a word. Linda K. Edwards writes this, if the majority stands up against it, and we find our own venues, then we will just have two societies. Getting our kids away from the insanity is the hard part. Agreed. We'll leave it there for today. Don't forget to drop me notes and send me kind letters, mean letters, any letters at all. Email me. Go to stevegruber.com. Find out how. Drop me a note. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of. stevegruber.com. Don't forget to check it out. Lots to read there from me and John Solomon and others as well. Now, don't forget to start your day right here on Real America's Voice, also with me. I'll bring lots of coffee, so you should too, and then I'll see you back here tomorrow afternoon for America's Voice Live.